Hello, everybody. It's 11:04 p.m. Central Time on Friday, the 17th of September, 2021. Hope you're doing well. I'm here on the Earthquake 3D live stream in the office with the little cat, Hans, and you may hear him scurrying around, but we're here to talk about the earthquake that just struck in Southern California. Let me get a display capture turned on. Came in originally at 4.7. They've now done the magical downgrade down to 4.2. Shave a half magnitude off. That's a fair amount to shave off, I'll tell you what. But whether it's a 4.7 or 4.2, we can go look at the station list from the USGS. Oh, here, let me turn this off. This is our music we were playing earlier from my viewer DJ Jean. Okay, anyway, let's go click on the earthquake info, Carson, California. Go over to the technical details and the origin page and just see what they have for the magnitude list. Now, they're not showing us how they're coming to their determination. No station details contributed on this, so you got to wonder, again, what they're doing there. But let's go to the local magnitude lists. There's different ways to view this, local magnitudes. And we're going to go down the list, look on the right-hand side, and what you're going to see are different magnitudes read by different stations. The closer we get to the earthquake, the bigger the quake is going to be detected. So what we do is what I do, is throw out the high end and throw out the low end on the local list, and then that gives us a good broad swath of what the earthquake actually is, right? So just by averages, the number of stations helps. So if we have a whole bunch more stations, that of course helps. So we're going to throw out the high ends, which I'm seeing go up into the 5 range, 5, 5.1, 5.2. And we're going to throw out the low end range, which is 4.2, 4.3, 4.4. Actually, look how high we're going up. We're going up to 5.4, 5.6. If there's a whole bunch of stations that detect 5s, look, there are. The way I look at that is how could that many stations be wrong if we're getting a bunch of upper 4s and low 5s, and the USGS comes in with 4.2, well, we throw out the low end, just like we throw out the ultra high end. So ultra low end is 4.2. Ultra high end is going up into the mid-range 5 level. It was felt by people all the way across the area, which pretty much tells me it's bigger than 4.2. Look again. How could this many stations be wrong and an egghead in the laboratory or in a cubicle farm be correct? And again, I just have to wonder, and sorry guys, we have the kitty in here. He's doing all kinds of stuff. Okay, so now let's go look the location up now that we're convinced that it's a greater earthquake than 4.2, or at least I am convinced that it's a greater earthquake. I'm thinking more like upper 4, 4.9 to 5.0. It would be funny if they brought it in back up to 4.9, but I'm thinking like low end 5, upper 4. And we're going to look at the location in Carson, California, and then we're going to go look up the fault zone map, which is going to tremendously help us. But it's down below a parking lot of Carson Town Square and Ralph's. Well, okay, guys, that's like a scene from, what's that disaster movie? Was that 2012, where they're in the grocery store and it rips in half? I think it is. It's the movie 2012. And they might even have been in a Ralph's. I don't know. But what we're right next to is a big refinery. Do you see this here? So huge area for storage of gas and oil. And a lot of that gas and oil comes from the pumping operations in the area. For instance, up here, there's a boatload of oil and gas wells that are constantly pumping 24 hours a day. And they're all over the hillsides here at the Baldwin Hills. And that's just one of them. There's so many. Up here, there's just thousands of them. And we go down to the southeast by southeast, and there's at least hundreds going through the range here on the east side of LA. So getting back to it, a fairly large earthquake striking right down here. Well, this puts us right next to the old oil fields, which used to be here. And you know what? I could maybe even search. I might be able to search it. I don't know if it's going to bring it up. Carson, California. Old oil. Let's just see if that brings it up for images. That might not be a specific enough search on that. what I'm going to be looking for, and I, again, up. Here we go. The LA oil fields. Check this out, guys. Look as far as they go. Look at this, guys. It was in LA. They used to have these old wooden derricks all over the place. They look at the, like, there's the street. I don't know where that is in LA, but just an example. A whole bunch of them. All right. First Los Angeles residential oil field, 1895. Look at, there's small ones, big ones, all over the place. There's a house right there, nestled in between. The derricks on either side of the front of their house. Okay, anyway, the reason I'm showing that to you is we get back over here, and now this has all been developed. There's been subdivisions built on top of it, freeways, highways, whatever you want to call them, and that's most likely the cause of the quake. An old drill point. The old drill points might even be where they still currently have the Shell oil refinery, that they may have kept that land or area right through there. Anyway, these drill points, and you saw how many there were just in a few of those pictures, go down a few hundred to maybe 1,000 feet at the most, but maybe a few hundred feet. And the way they used to cap these off was with a wood plug and a few bags of concrete. Yeah. And then, of course, bury on top of it many layers, and we move forward, 120 years, and next thing you know, we get a push that comes in from the north. And then we have to talk about where this came from and the other activity that's going on further to the north by northwest, all the way up here on the edge of the plate boundary up in Alaska that struck earlier today, the fives, and the incoming activity also coming across through the area of Hawaii. So Hawaii, number of earthquakes and magnitudes started to increase, and up in Alaska, number of earthquakes and magnitudes also started to increase by a full magnitude at each location. So we went up into the mid-range 3 level in Hawaii and swarming, and we went up to 5 level instead of 4s. So a full magnitude increase before this starts to strike. Now we need to look back at the area even further to see the equal spacing or semi-equal spacing of the same-sized quakes, because you got to remember this is not a 4.2. Again, this is like a 4.7 to 4.9. And why does that matter? Look what struck down on the south side on the plate boundary down here. Let's go over to the plate boundary map. Show you where we're talking about down here in Mexico. So down here on the red line, again, the plate boundary is the red line. Down here we have 4.7, 4.9. We're connected by 4s going up along the plate boundary back to LA. And then we go back up here, and again, you got to remember we have a big 5 or a bigger earthquake of 5. Now, in between the two, that's where the new quake broke. Again, between down here and up here. And in between the two, the halfway point between the two is, here, let me back it out so you can see it again. Again, 5 up here and 4.9 down here. And in between the two, 4.9. That is the halfway point between the two across that vast distance. The rough halfway point. Now, why am I looking for halfway points? This gets into the standing wave principle and what I think is going on with the earthquakes as they're traveling across an area. So a wave first travels across the area. This is the energy that causes the earthquakes. VLF of some kind of very low frequency. Now, as it goes across an area, it reflects back into itself, the wave. And that happens, I believe, on the plate boundaries themselves. Okay, so let me show that to you again on the plate boundaries, on the red lines here. But the standing wave that's forming is forming between Alaska and Mexico, with the middle point being South California. Again, let's show it to you on the earthquakes now. 5.0 up here in Alaska, 4.9 all the way down here in Mexico, and then in between the two, a connecting stepping stone path of 4s. The only thing missing is a 4 off the coast of the Northwest, and we know what's going on with the earthquakes up in the Northwest, out off the coast. If a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? That's what's going on with the quakes up in the Pacific Northwest. So that's the only spot missing the quake, and that's because they're omitting the quakes. They're deliberately not reporting them. Then you would see a perfect stepping stone path of the same size quakes, mid-range 4s to upper 4s, going from Alaska all the way down to Mexico. And again, the only middle spot that we're missing is off the coast of the Pacific Northwest. And the reason I'm taking the time to show that all to you is the standing wave. This VLF, very low frequency standing wave that I think is forming in the plate boundaries, drops off the same sized earthquakes, or within a hair of a point of each other, all the way across a vast distance. And VLF, the VLF we're talking about here being a very low frequency that would travel thousands of miles, and it would be generated down below the plates by something as yet unknown. Now we know somewhat is causing it. It's the deep earthquakes. The deep earthquakes from down below the plates are generating a vibration that then spreads out and away from where the hammering action is taking place underneath the plates. So first there's a hammering action, then there's a spread of standing waves. And then the earthquakes break. And I think the earthquakes break at the peak of each wave, but there's no way to know. I mean, maybe some point in the future they could, but whether the earthquakes happen at the top of the wave or the bottom of the wave, the peak or the trough, that we're talking about the same sized energy distributing out across a tank. Now, we're talking about Mother Nature's tank. So the tank here goes up and around, down, and here, and it connects over to the east, into the secondary plate over to the east, actually. That goes into the Caribbean, by the way. But here and here, the 2 points on either end of the tank, and the middle point comes up with a new 5. Almost just sneezed into the microphone. Okay, so let's recap. Earthquakes going across a vast area from Alaska all the way down to Mexico, and they're all about the same size, in the 5 range. The new 5, and that's what it is, USGS downgrade is just hogwash at this point. It's actually, for those of us who pay attention online, we have to openly question and check. Because there, again, it just makes no sense with all the stations showing one thing and Egghead in a cubicle says another. I go with the stations. If there's that many stations that are wrong, we need to recalibrate and redo every station. We also need to maybe source it out to an outside company of some kind, private company, that can do the appropriate calibration, whatever. And then that way they don't need to constantly adjust, because in this day and age, in this computer age, I mean, imagine if meteorologists were manually adjusting the, I don't know, barometer readings of, I mean, it's just at that point, you would start to, wonder what was going on. If they were changing the barometer readings to be something else, you'd wonder about the barometers, wouldn't you? Or temperature, or anything else that you can measure, for that matter. Okay, there should be a set scale, and it's not a sliding scale. That's what I'm getting at. And if the stations are not capable, we need to make stations which are capable. If the people are not capable, then the people need to be replaced. I'm not going off on anybody, just saying. Now, what else is going on? Deep quakes. The deep quakes have picked up over the past several days. This is not going to be a full update in any measure. I'm not going to be going over every single quake on the planet. But when I look at it this way, and I see this many in the course of 6 days, raised high off the globe, every deep earthquake that you see here, and these are not all of them by far. Europeans are reporting double and triple however many their USGS is showing, so, and they're legitimate quakes. It's USGS is omitting the quakes, literally not reporting them. We're talking about dozens of deep quakes across the West Pacific, from north of Japan all the way down here to north of New Zealand, and of course back across Indonesia. That's just here. We're not counting the deep quakes on the other side of the plate, which are all the way over in Brazil and, well, not Brazil, I'm sorry, Argentina, and across the planet the other way. Now, 7 days worth of earthquakes looks like a jumbled mess, and it somewhat is, but you should be able to trace out the pattern of quakes coming out of Indonesia and going over into Asia. Check it out. So it makes like a U-shaped bend and goes around and up into Asia. It follows where our arrows are, and the energy piles up and clusters up at this peak pinnacle bend, which, let me get all these quakes out of there now. See how the steep bend or curve of the plate goes down to the south across Afghanistan and Pakistan, back across to the west over into Iran. Look where the earthquakes pile up. So this standing wave that I'm talking about reflects back into itself. This is a reflect back point. Reflects back to here, and we see the middle point break. That's Nepal going up north into the Taklamakan Desert in China. But that's just an example. Wave gets stuck in here, and we get a end of the tank here and an end of the tank here. Look at the steep curves of the bend of the plate. Let's go over to the USGS map and show it to you this way. Over here. So at the steep bends and curves in the plate, okay, a new earthquake just struck right here. This matters. Look where the quake just struck, the red quake. That is a 4.9 over in Indonesia. Okay, that's a perfect example. The new 4.9, which just struck recently in the last hour, struck right next to Mount Krakatau. But I'm going to back it out and look at the points between over to the east and over to the west. We have a 5.3 over to the west, and over to the east we have a 5.2. And if we go around the bend of the plate and come back over to the 5.3, the halfway point between the two is Java going into Sumatra right here. Again, if we go around, over, and up, straighten that out to a straight line, again, that puts the halfway point right in here. Well, a new 5 just broke at that middle point in between the two previous earthquakes from the past few days. This standing wave that I'm talking about takes a few days to travel a few thousand miles or more. And if the push is great enough, it can even take a few hours. We've seen earthquakes back to back on both sides of the Pacific in a day. Okay, so let's recap. Deep earthquakes hammer up from down below. They spread out and away, and they spread out the same size quakes, spread out across a huge distance as this VLF wave is traveling through these red lines, the plate boundaries, which are like a wave tank containing the wave. So, when the big push comes across, it tries to spread out and equalize across the planet to the opposite side. The opposite side of the planet is called the antipode. To the opposite side of anything is called an antipode, but as we flow across the planet, the same size quakes get dropped off at every catch point. Then the middle points get filled in as the wave spreads. So here's another example. An open area where there's no earthquakes right now in Iran. We have earthquakes over to the west. Take them all, add them together, all the 4s, equals about 4.7. Why does that matter? Over on the east side, 4.7 and a 4.9. We got the cat going ballistic in here, guys, so Hans is doing his thing. If you hear the dinging of the bell, that's not the earthquake ding. That is little Mr. Miner Ding in the background learning how to ding the bell. No pun intended. Okay. Over to the west. Once we get over into Europe, we have the same principle applying with the same sized earthquakes going across a huge distance, but we take a magnitude step down. We go from here at 4s down to here at 3s. But the 3s are spread now between Gibraltar and back over at La Palma, La Cumbra Vieja. And you may know about that earthquake swarm at that volcano. The alert level has been raised. They're calling it a crisis on volcano discovery. The magma intrusion continues and the size earthquakes continue to increase. Well, I shouldn't say fully increase. They're in the 3 range now. We started at 1s, went up to 2s, crept up to 3s. I think the highest they went was 4, so we're not as high as the peak, but it's carrying on. Now, the new development is this new swarm back behind it, indicating new flow is getting ready to come into the area. Let me show you where it's coming from. Right here. See the red line again. So we have basically 4s near 5s going across Asia. Once we get into Europe, we take a step down to 4s. Once we get over to the western portion of the Mediterranean, we take a step down to 3s. But look where they're striking. Gibraltar. But look what's there. It's the catch point for the plate boundary across the area. Do you see it? That's where the quakes pile up there, indicating a new push is coming in now, right out of there. But where's it coming from? Just go back over to the east. It's coming from over here, and it's going over to the west. The wave, the standing wave, is traveling. It got somewhat absorbed here at the juncture of the plate boundaries going up into Italy and up across Europe. Let me show you what happened there. At the juncture, well, let's get all the earthquakes out of there. At the juncture, we have 3 arrows. They've been on here for years. It's the way the energy flows. And look where it struck. 1-4 went smack into the middle of the plate. The rest of the energy is going to be going around the outside edge of Europe, and in the next few days, we should see a few quakes dropped off across Romania, Poland, and back even maybe to my people in Holland, here, or maybe right across the channel to the Brits. Damn Brits. The Royal Society of Know-It-Alls says that's not possible. It's just not possible. Oh, wait, that's Russian. Yes, it's not possible. No, the Russians would totally tell you. It's totally possible to know about earthquakes and where to look for them. I'm sure they probably figured this out a long time ago, kept it under wraps. Okay, so something else I would like to show you that spans a huge distance that must be pointed out. The same sized earthquakes, like I've been talking about this whole update, have spread from here over at Fiji, across, up, over into Asia, across Asia, and up into Alaska. Let's get all the smaller earthquakes out of there and just look at the fives. You'll see what I'm talking about here. Here we go. 4.9 and greater. So, again, take a look at it. 5.2 to 5.4 across pretty much the whole mass. Once we get up to Alaska, it gets up to 5.6, but don't be surprised by that. On the other side of the plate, here we have a 5.8. Those are within, again, 0.2 of each other. So 5.8 on one side of the plate and 5.6 to 5.7 on the other up at Alaska. How are those two connected? Well, let's go back to the red line map again from the USGS. So 5.8 down here, and on the other side of the plate corresponding a 5.6. Again, they're about the same size on both sides of the plate as energy is trying to travel around it, and it is traveling around it, dropping off these fives all the way along the way. And get back over here. I mean, come on. What's the halfway point between this 5 and this 5? Well, if we just draw a straight line, you go right through southern Nevada, or, well, let's see. It goes through southern California. But if we go around the bend of the plate, it's much more defined. That is the middle point between the two. Right here. Let me show it to you one more time on the red line map, just to prove my case. That the halfway point was just filled in by a new larger earthquake. Again, a 4 point whatever we want to call it. USGS doing some funny business on the downgrade. They really are. So I'm not going to accept 4.3. I will not accept it. Nobody's going to ever convince me that many stations are wrong. They just do this to downplay it and try and stop people from being worried. That's it. It's the only reason, I think. Well, they might also be doing it to try and pad the numbers, but that gets into a whole other story of faking earthquakes and keeping the numbers the way they always have been. Like they can't ever show an increase. Do you know why? Well, they say the reason they can never show an increase is because we have more sensitive instruments. So we're going to detect more earthquakes. So there's not an increase happening. But they said that there was never an increase ever happening. Have you ever heard them talk, professionals, about an earthquake increase? Ever? Even at the time of Japan megaquake in 2011, they said it was low and that it was just a random event. Now we know better than any of that combined. So I'm going to bring you back here and we're going to talk about this one more time. A upper 4 to low 5 struck in LA, and it struck directly at the old Carson oil fields right here. And I apologize for the cat scraping the litter in the background, but that's kind of where we are with the old oil wells. We're now scraping into these old points, and we go in to look in where it's scraping and where it's coming from. Look at the fault connected in here. Here's the earthquake in LA. And we go up to the west by northwest, the Newport Inglewood Rose Fault Canyon fault zone. But going up to the west-northwest, you see it connects out over to Santa Cruz, and it branches out like spider webs going up to, well, the coast of California, basically, all the way to Monterey Bay. And if you knew about the earthquakes which struck over the past several days, this would be no shock to you to see that there was a line of quakes that led down to this. In my last update, I mentioned that the creeping section was starting to creep. Now, this is the creeping section of the San Andreas, so everybody knows about the San Andreas, but I would like to point out the spacing on the quakes. Notice anything? Pretty obvious. The spacing is just like what I'm talking about with the standing wave, but it's focused in, isn't it? It's not a very wide, multi-thousand-mile standing wave. This is more of a high-frequency wave, where each wave height or each wave peak is just a short distance apart, a few miles. Now that's still VLF, but it's a higher version of VLF. So you would have very, very low frequency, ultra low frequency, extremely low frequency, ELF, VLF, ULF. Okay, there's different variations on that. But this would be a higher version of that, a higher frequency version of that. And the number of earthquakes also shows that. Higher frequency means just more. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right across here, leading up to, these all struck first, then this. Now go over on the California-Nevada border, and it's the same thing going on. But we have to go back 2 days, or actually 3 days, to see the spread. Let's look at all the 0.0 and greater coming down from the California-Nevada border. And what you should be able to see is a somewhat equal spaced triangle of quakes south of Lake Tahoe and going down here to the supervolcano at Long Valley. Again, right here at the California-Nevada border. Then you should also see a diagonal line of quakes that goes right down past Ridgecrest. Same time that's all going on, look at the south end of the valley down here. This, all of these, at least down at the south tip of the valley, are at pumping operations, oil and gas, directly next to oil pumps, within a few miles at the most. But everything up here, San Andreas, going back to the Hayward Fault and, of course, the Bay Area, it all points diagonally back up to here, where they're not reporting quakes out in the ocean deliberately. But if you saw it, you would just see a stepping stone path that comes out of Alaska, and you tie it all together yourself. You wouldn't need me to do it. Other professionals would see it. The scandal would be over. The scandal about them saying earthquakes couldn't be forecast and that there was no spread that was noticeable, etc., that would all be put to rest if the appropriate reporting of earthquakes was done. And we know that at this point. I think it's kind of a running joke with many thousands of us online. So let's get back right to the end of this. The deep earthquakes. We're watching for new deep quakes, and it's pretty obvious next to the deep quakes. We have shallower, larger earthquakes, so we have deep 4s and deep 5s. Now we're having shallow 5.8, 5.6. This is over in the West Pacific. But when deep quakes happen in conjunction with each other, I want you to think of this like a relay runner effect, where one deep quake is passing off the energy to the other as it's running around the tank, down below the tank, hammering up. And when it hammers up, let me get you back to the start of this, the deep quakes hammering in on the underside of the plate. What I think's going on is a very wide VLF. Maybe we could call it QLF, quake low frequency. So wide, thousands of miles wide, and it focuses in on itself down below the plate. It can't compress down into the fluid like magma. And it goes into the asthenosphere, which is the semi-melted area down below the plate, and breaks with a quake that wouldn't normally happen because there's not anything there to break. It's the asthenosphere. It's somewhat plasticky, supposedly. So if this energy is hammering in, which I think it is, it spreads up, out, and away, and the more it hammers, just think of it like the first deep quake like this on the screen. So one deep quake happens, it puts out a little ripple. Let's say it's a deep 4. Then another series of deep quakes happen. And it gets down to the end of the tank and it reflects back into itself. And all of a sudden, the magnitudes start to increase up at the surface. So hammer down below would be like the hammering at this end of the tank. And it comes up, out, in a way, following the red lines in the plate. The more that hammers in, look what happens. Reflects back into itself more and more and more, and the amplitude increases. Now, amplitude, where have I heard that before? That's a version or a way of measuring magnitude. Amplitude, magnitude are somewhat interchangeable. I'm not saying they're fully interchangeable, but you get the point what I'm saying here. As more energy is pumped back into the tank, as more energy is pumped into the tank as well, the size of the wave increases. And I propose that the size of the wave, as it increases, the earthquakes break along the way. And they're equally spaced. And one more thing on this equal spacing thing is that as the wave travels through the tank, I'm just going to park my mouse over the peak of one of the waves, and you'll see the valley of the next wave fills it in. What does that mean? Well, one wave fills in the other wave's middle point, guys. Look. Again, one wave, as it travels, fills in the middle point that was open before. And where have I heard that? That's what's going on with the quakes, going all the way out over across into Europe, going all the way around over into the United States. Once we get into the U.S., same principle applies, but it goes around the rock of the interior portion of the craton. The craton diagram here on the screen. The earthquakes match it. This is just a day. This is 1 day's quakes. Here's 2. Here's 3. Here's the week. Let's turn off all the actual magnitudes so you can just see the rings, and we'll turn the rings down a little bit so you can see what's going on. So anybody should be able to see this. Coming in from the northwest, there's a diagonal line of quakes going out of Montana, dead ending into Yellowstone, and then across Utah, what looks like an arrow shape in its own right, just of the quakes. That's why we put an arrow here to begin with. Because back when I was first starting this 9 years ago, I noticed that there was a shape of quakes across Utah in particular that looked like an arrow. And it pointed over to Colorado, where the same size quakes would then go down here and come back up across here and go over to here. And we would see that happen in the course of days. And I thought, what was going on there? And I didn't know about cratons. Get this. Somebody leaves me a comment in 2011. A geologist of some kind, some professor, and he was using his official account. And he goes, you won't get my attention unless you start talking about cratons. That's just a comment I remember being left. And I thought, what the hell are cratons? Are it croutons? Like salads? Hold on. Yeah, salads or something, you know. I didn't know. So I went, looked it up, and I searched craton, and up came this diagram. Again, this is 2011. And I went and did some research, and I saw that it matched. I couldn't believe it. And, of course, that was not the intention of the commenter who left. I think he was trying to be a smartass. But what I noticed was the earthquakes were coming in a diagonal line out of Montana, going down across Yellowstone, and then going down through Colorado, down through Texas, back up. And that it is. It's a perfect match. And this is in 7 days' time now. So it's not that long of a time period. And it's about the same size quakes that go across the plate. It's within a magnitude of each other. So it's not that much loss of energy. The equations of elasticity and absorption need to be adjusted or redefined, or new equations need to be made which adjust for this QLF frequency or wave that's traveling across plates. You know, they say that one earthquake can't cause the other, and I agree. I think all the earthquakes are being caused by a greater force, and we just see the result, the earthquakes. It's not that one earthquake strikes and causes another. It's that they're all being caused by this VLF, low frequency, that's coming up from the core of the earth, and the core of the earth is vibrating like a bass drum, vibrating up, out, and away. And then it gets into the core of the earth and what the core of the earth really is, which is an electroplasma down on the inside of the core of the earth, which really is ironic that I'm talking about electroplasmas, because today I got to talk to my power expert who's going to be handling the generators, and he is a subscriber. And he was telling me about AC and DC, which I'm not an electrician, and I really don't understand too much about electricity, quote unquote. I wouldn't be doing my own wiring or anything like that. But I am here to tell you the core of the earth is acting just like your wall socket. And whether it's AC, alternating current, you know what else is AC? Radio waves. Microwaves. Microwaves are AC. Did you know that? And your antenna picks up the AC current of the radio wave, takes it down the antenna, and it actually gets converted to DC via a rectenna, or RECTENNA. Like in the NASA experiments, they can transmit power that way. Efficiently, too, better than a wire. I have the experiment video on my channel from 1975, where they were able to transmit 35 kilowatts a mile across an open valley at 85% efficiency. Again, if you were to run wire across the valley, it would actually be less efficient. So they were able to beam it across using radar, using only a small portion of their 500,000 watt radar. So 500,000 watts coming out from the radar, transmitting a mile across a valley, that's microwave, and hitting a rectenna array, little diodes, gallium arsenide diodes that are attached to microwave antennas, like in your cell phone. So think of a microwave antenna in your cell phone. It's connected to a little gallium arsenide diode. And what that does is your antenna picks up the microwave, goes down the antenna to the diode. The diode vibrates basically on the inside of it. And it converts in that vibration process inside the diode. It converts the AC, the vibration, coming down the antenna, converts it to DC directly, the diode does, and outflows DC. And whatever the antenna picks up is what goes down and gets converted and put into the... NASA did it with light bulbs. It's amazing. Huge light bulbs, too, not like just lights for your house or something. I'm talking about like the kind for the military or something. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you that is VLF, very low frequency, is being generated from the core of the Earth. And the core of the Earth is electric. It's an electroplasma torch, hot enough to melt every element. Now think about this. Something hot enough to melt every element in the core of the Earth is rotating, and it turns iron and nickel and uranium and all the elements into vapor. A vaporous state, like a gas. And then we're talking about a plasma globe. You know, the kind you play with at the museum, or now you can just buy at Spencer's Gifts. If Spencer's Gifts even still exist, I'm dating myself there. You can get a black velvet poster there too, by the way. So, was that funny? Yeah. Okay, Dutch is in here with me. I just cracked a joke, guys. Come on. All right, now let's get back to it. VLF coming up from the core of the Earth, hammers in on the underside of the plate, and the more hammering, the more the wave starts to stand, and it spreads out and away. So when I start seeing a bunch of hammering coming in on the underside of the plate, and it spreads across to the United States, that's when I start to notify my viewers that something's going on. So I've already hoped that many people noticed over the past few days, and hope for the best, plan for the worst, right? But hoping that people would notice the spread that was taking place. And my viewers did not disappoint me. I saw you guys talking about it in chat. I've been lurking, but you can see the spread of the 4.9s going over to Asia, the spread of the 5s going up into Alaska, the spread of 5s going down toward 4.9s, going down towards New Zealand, and a 4.9 striking in the United States, another 4.9 striking down here in Mexico. I mean, need I carry on with the same sized quakes going all the way around the entire wave tank? And again, the wave tank is the Pacific plate in this case, all the way around it. So is it any wonder we get a 4.9 spreading out over this way, out of the wave tank, the way to the west, filling in the middle point? It is not a coincidence, and that's the principle of earthquake forecasting. You can start to look to the middle points between the current sets of quakes and look for similar or larger quakes if there's hammering action going on. So then you look for the deep quakes, the ones that are raised high off the globe. Makes it easy to identify. And that gets me back to the start of the update. We're still moving. California's moving at the drill points. The drill points are weak points, just like a volcano is a weak point. So if you live in California, you can see what's coming your way. You have to look up to Alaska and look over to Hawaii. You start seeing an increase coming across Hawaii. Number of earthquakes and magnitude start to go up. So if you're at 1s and 2s and you jump up to 3s and a 4 or something, and if you're up in Alaska and you're at 1s, 2s, and 3s and you jump up to 5s, well, you know there's an increase coming your way. And which way is it coming from? Let me show you. It's coming from over here in the West Pacific, up, around, and over, and into the United States from the Northwest. Well, how does that increase Hawaii? Look at Hawaii. Hawaii connects via the Hawaiian Island chain back to here, back up to here, and across over to here via the fracture zone. Now, there's a greater undersea mount chain of volcanoes. You have to look to see it, but I'll point it out to you. Comes out of Kamchatka, Russia, goes down, Hawaiian Island chain branches off over to this fracture zone, stops. But here, this. Now, here is Tamu Massive. It's about the same distance, almost within 50 miles or 100 miles. Hawaii is on one side and Tamu Massive is on the other of this undersea mount chain. Now, it makes a C-shape or a crescent-shape bend, and it goes down across and curves back into the south point of Peru. And look, that's where our other earthquakes tail off and begin. So energy flows down across, back up, this giant C-shape, but as it's coming in from the northwest, oh, good boy, Hans, comes in from up here, branches down to Hawaii, makes a beeline over to the east, only when the push is great enough. So you start seeing an increase here, you start seeing an increase up here, well, you know where it's coming from. It's coming from all the activity, the push up on the underside of the whole Pacific over here. And it goes up, around, over, and across back into the U.S. And the thing they're trying to hide from you the most is that there's a connection coming in from the northwest. Man, I think they even put it in writing, didn't they? Did they put all that in writing? Duchess, I'm asking you. You remember this, right? Me and Vidali and all that. They put it in writing. I'm pretty sure they put it all in writing, that there's no transfer and never has been any test area. And meanwhile, they were trying to take me down, literally, coming after my fundraisers and sending their top dogs after me, well, top professors. publicly. So again, you got to start to ask questions. You got to ask openly. You got to look for a pattern, and there is. There is a pattern to this standing wave. No doubt about it. That gets me back to you guys being able to watch yourself. Fist pump to the air. You can start doing this yourself. I've already published how to do it. It's no secret. The full step-by-step directions are already online. I put it out in an hour-long video when I issued the forecast for a 7.0 to strike in California, and it hit 24 hours later, 36 hours later. Hit basically 2 days later. So issue the warning for a 7, and I hardly ever issue warnings for 7s hardly anywhere, well, especially in the United States. And the biggest earthquake in 20 years for the whole state of California hit 2 days later in the area where we warned. We warned Central California from Bay Area down to the valley, and Ridgecrest got hit right beyond it, about 100 miles over to the east. And it got hit with a 7. I'm not bragging, I just have to tell you, that's when I published my latest video on how to forecast an earthquake. It is no secret. I'm not trying to sit on top of it and make a buck or any of that. All this is free to watch, by the way. Whether you're on YouTube or on Twitch, anybody can watch for free. If you want to chat in the chat room on Twitch, it's an added benefit to talk to other people who are seismically minded. You guys know YouTube's a jungle. Hey, everybody on YouTube, by the way. I'm going to be uploading this in about 10 minutes from Twitch here, and we're going to go get it in a premiere over on YouTube. We can watch the jungle. Everybody comes out of the jungle. The drums start to beat. It's like an episode of Tarzan, and I come swinging in. I'm not going to do Tarzan yell, but I could try. And I come swinging in, and man, I'll tell you what, I wrestle with the lions and the cougars and whatever. Literally cougars in this case. All right. Word up, guys. It is 11:46. Do you have an earthquake plan? Now, let's just end this with a serious note, but one that you can remember. You need to have an earthquake plan, but it's important for you to remember this saying: don't be scared, be prepared. Pretty simple. It's kind of like a motto, like a Boy Scout, Girl Scout type motto. Don't be scared, be prepared. And being prepared means watching the quakes come your way. Now that you know they come your way, you kind of don't have an excuse. It's like the weather. Watch it come your way. You start seeing excitement come across, well, you know in California to keep an eye out. But being prepared also means just having the basics met with an emergency kit. I don't sell any of that stuff, but you need to have a bug-out bag, as it's called in slang terms, the emergency kit. Change of clothes, set of shoes, a little bit of food and water to get you through a couple days. Water is 7 pounds a gallon, basically, so you're going to probably want to skimp on the water, bare minimum on the water. You could probably find other places to get something to drink, but the food thing, too, for a few days, we're thinking prepackaged. You're talking, the granola bars and the fruit roll-ups and the packaged meats like beef jerkies. You won't be cooking a steak on night one of a complete total meltdown disaster. I hope not. If you are, there's something wrong, or you're living high on the hog. And then you also need to have the batteries, the flashlight, your first aid kit. That's also a must. Don't forget your first aid kit. And you guys will think of things that are way better than what I'm suggesting. Just get the ball rolling. Extra set of car keys and house keys, identification. The list goes on, but you guys do it. Do it. Actually do it. Get a little bug-out bag together and just have it somewhere. You don't have to have it on full display and brag about it to your friends and family. Just have it somewhere where you can get it easily, grab it at a moment's notice. It'll come in handy for all kinds of things. The extra set of keys, especially when you lose your car or house key. Man, I'm telling you, I've already used that a couple times. I'm like, yes, bug-out bag, extra set of keys. And then I find my original set. Right, babe? Yep. No, you find my original set. Yeah, after I'm walking around swearing up a storm. All right, guys, we're out of here. Let's go upload to YouTube.